This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. Though I am around true crime, obviously quite a bit because of appearances on television and this podcast even, I will have people that will approach me and ask me, what is my favorite true crime program on television? And my boilerplate answer every single time is I do not watch true crime stories. It's what they used to call it, a busman's holiday. I like things that are a bit lighter. I like things that I guess you could say might be, I don't know, comically edifying. I don't know if that's the right framework. But it's in that vein that my wife Kim and I, we spend most of our time watching things like rom-coms or old comedies that we can from television. Big Seinfeld fan, by the way. But there's a person who we have enjoyed over the years watching on the big screen and small screen, but to a greater degree on the big screen, and that's Matthew Perry. I think probably my favorite movie of all time that he is in, and certainly probably in my top 5, is The Whole Nine Yards. I love that movie. It is absolutely hilarious with him and Bruce Willis. However, many times when the mask of comedy falls away, there's left behind the true face, a face of tragedy. And today, unfortunately, we're going to be digging into the case of Matthew Perry's death, and what's in the news right now subsequent to his death are the arrest of 5 individuals who likely had a hand in bringing about his end, and of course the end of a comic genius's life. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. I think the thing I love most about Matthew Perry, Dave, is that when it comes to comedy, he made it look effortless. He's one of those guys, for me, that can do physical comedy. And if you ever want to see perfect example of physical comedy, it's juxtaposition of Bruce Willis in The Whole Nine Yards. Matthew Perry just had a way of movement, a way of reacting to things that it doesn't matter how many times I watch that movie, I will split a gut every single time. It's so funny. And Kim, my wife, is actually a fan of the movie Fools Rush In with Selma Hayek. And we've watched it a number of times. And again, physical comedy, all the way through falling on a cactus plant and coming up with all of the cactus needles stuck in his backside and along his back. And it sounds painful, but it was in fact funny. And it's really tragic, to see this long road that this man has been on, and to essentially to that fateful day when he was found by his assistant floating face down initially in his pool, or in the hot tub in his adjacent to his pool at his home in Pacific Palisades. And there's been cases like this, obviously, for years and years, and you just don't see it coming. And I think many people that deal with addiction, they believe that they are in fact bulletproof, but that certainly wasn't the case with Mr. Perry, now was it?
I got sober August 7th, 1990. It's a long time ago, but I remember watching Friends in the 90s. And if you go back and watch the episodes, watch Matthew Perry's physicalness, not the comedy. Look at him. You can see when he's using and when he's not. You can actually tell by his appearance whether he's using pills or something else. You can tell when it's alcohol. Matthew Perry, by his own admission, was an alcoholic and addict and had tried to become sober many times. And you can physically see his demise on that show, up and down. Weight loss, weight gain. Sometimes, think about it, when you've got millions of dollars, you can cover up a multitude of sins with money. And he couldn't cover it up. They all knew. And yet they loved him. He was this is a guy that everybody liked. Even though he had a lot of issues, they loved him. He was a good guy, not a bad guy.
They described him as a sweet man, and I don't doubt that.
Addiction's an equal opportunity destroyer.
Yeah.
There are only a couple of things that happen at the end of it. You either get sober and get your life back, sometimes for the first time, or you end up in jail, or you die. I have oftentimes wondered, Joe, I don't know that much about ketamine other than hearing people talk about it. I thought ketamine was an animal tranquilizer.
Yeah, and it really, it came into, I don't want to say into fashion necessarily, but it was viewed as an alternative to PCP, phencyclidine, back in the 60s. And it has been used in treatment relative to animals, and it's a non-opioid tranquilizer, and it has hallucinogenic effects.
Okay, so what's the difference between that and, say, because a non-opioid? Because most of the times when we think about people overdosing, it's on an opioid of some type. We hear of OxyContin and things like that. Where does this fit into the stream of drugs? You say it's non-opioid, but right. It has hallucinogenic properties.
It does, and it has sedative properties as well. And it's used. It creates this kind of sense of euphoria. Mm-hmm. You can have a relaxed sensation, and it's been used also as a club drug. I don't know if you recall back in the, Special K is what it's referred to as. And, you think about some of the other drugs that were out there that particularly became fashionable toward the end of the 80s, these synthetic drugs like ecstasy mm-hmm. that were used. And it knocks down inhibitions when it's dosed correctly. And keep in mind that for ketamine, it's actually used as an anesthetic, so that it's a precursor to can be applied prior to surgery.
Wow! So
it's gonna put that person in that kind of dreamlike state. And for our friends out there mm-hmm. that have had to go through surgery, right. They'll push that one drug, prior to surgery, and it's going to vary, mm-hmm. Dependent upon the physician. But it's that kind of floating feeling that you have. It doesn't necessarily put you into that deep, dark blackness that you have when they actually hit you with anesthesia. It gets you into a very relaxed state. And look, hey, I got to admit something to you, Dave. I think probably for most of us in the world that we live in, that's a desirable state, perhaps, to be in. Wouldn't it be great if you could get that on tap and not have to pay the price that you do mm-hmm. with a substance like that? But unfortunately, that's hard to attain. I think that many people that unfortunately fall into this trap of addiction see it as an opportunity to not have to do that work. A good friend of mine, Dave Mack, actually said that, you can make a choice to be sober mm-hmm. and that sobriety exists for you. But it's hard. One of the really heartbreaking things that about Matthew Perry, I think, is that by his own count, he said I think he had detoxed 60 times, mm-hmm. Dave, over the course of and right. what that drags your body through, that, you know, where you're desiring this drug and it's this kind of deep desire that you have, your body's screaming for it, and you have to deny yourself that. I cannot be in a place in my mind where I could imagine that beast kind of raising its head. And when the thing about, if you have an addiction issue and you're going down this road, you want to escape the pain of what you're faced with relative to detox every single time. Can you imagine that moment that you make a choice where you're saying, okay, I'm going to turn my life around. I'm not going to pick it up again. And you take that step and where you're going to be detoxed, and it's like taking a punch right in the nose, only worse.
With Matthew Perry using ketamine apparently his diagnosis was using this as a depression therapy. I read that it was used in therapy for those who are, that other chemicals are not working.
They're resistant to it.
Yeah.
And that's, and I think that.
What does that mean?
Well, that any other kind of medication that might be prescribed, you know, to a patient to overcome these depressive moments. And I've been through them myself. For those of you that know my story, diagnosed with PTSD, and there's some very dark corners of my mind where, in all honesty with you, that took me to some very dark areas where I had to go through incredible bouts of depression and try to overcome those. And part of overcoming that through my own therapy was medications that helped me along the way. The problem is that for some of us, I think, many of us to a certain degree have maybe a predisposition to depression. And there's a thread that runs through life. But you know, Dave, in a more sinister sense, there's also another thread that those individuals, and God bless them, that are wrought with addictive personalities, the specter of depression, their need to feel better. They're those that are out there that, just like a watering hole in Africa, are waiting for the weakest among the herd to strike. And in this particular case, they did strike. And it's, in my opinion, they brought about the death of Matthew Perry.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Ketamine can be applied in a couple of methods. It, in fact, can be injected, and for those that are going through ketamine infusion treatment, it goes into a port, an intravenous port, where it can be injected and administered by medical professionals. It can be injected IM, which is intramuscular, and that does in fact occur. You can actually snort it, and it can be consumed orally as well. In Matthew Perry's case, we have to understand that on October 28th, 2023, which is when Mr. Perry was found deceased, he had, according to reports, had received multiple shots of ketamine per his personal assistant. who eventually found him deceased, who came back home and found him deceased, floating face down, and was able to put him in a seated position. Now, this individual related that it's actually Kenneth Iwamasa, who was his personal assistant, admitted that he had shot Matthew Perry up multiple times, maybe as many as 6 times. Matthew Perry had requested, according to this gentleman, that he shoot him up with a big one, quote unquote, according to Iwamasa. It's not surprising that once you get to that point where you have this drug working on your system, it's going to begin to drag you down. And of course, drugs and a body of water do not mix at all. You put someone in a hot tub, for instance, after they've been injected with a drug like ketamine that has this kind of surreal, impact on yourself, where, all of you're in a totally relaxed state. You can imagine someone just kind of sleepily kind of passing away in this environment. And then you double that up with the warmth, say, for instance, of a hot tub, and the individual's found floating in there. It's certainly a lethal combination, Dave.
For those who don't know the difference between intramuscular and intravenous, what does that mean in terms of injecting and using drugs for the user?
Yeah, well, if you can imagine, if you can go an IV drug, for instance, when this is injected directly into your body, it's going to hit your system like a locomotive because it's instantaneous. Anywhere where you can get the uptake of the drug immediately, first off, you're going to get the full effect of it. It's not going to diminish at all, where if, say, for instance, you're going IM, you're dealing with kind of an absorbency factor there. If you go IV, it's driving it right into your system. I've actually worked cases where people have placed cocaine, for instance. They've inserted it rectally, and it is absorbed directly into the system at a very, very high rate, and will put these individuals on the ceiling, if you will. And it's drug ODs in and of themselves. And I've had a lot of experience working cases where I would go to what they used to refer to as shooting galleries. It's a common gathering spot out on the street, that is. We're not talking about people that are very wealthy where you're having drugs directly delivered to your home, okay? Now, I'm not saying that those two people that are street level drug abusers and, say, the celebrity set, that they're not going to cross paths, because there's any number of times when this has occurred over the years where they do in fact cross paths. The people that supply the drugs deal with both sides, whoever that they can entice into this because they have a particular weakness for the drugs. It is about money, and that is the sole driver behind it. And, you go to a lot of these really deplorable locations that I've been on many, many times, where you will walk into a home, for instance, or a house. It's not really a home. Home implies something else, doesn't it, entirely? You go into a house that's used as a shooting gallery, and you'll find discarded needles all over the place. You'll actually find tourniquets all over the place, or something that has been used as a tourniquet. Many times they'll use a belt, those sorts of things. And they'll be discarded all over the place. And it's filth. It's filthy. It's dirty, and they're very, very dangerous. I actually had an event where I was a very young investigator at the time, and I was working a case of a guy that had actually OD'd on heroin, and the police had not swept this old structure very well. And there was another junkie inside of a closet in the house, and he came to while we were there and charged at us with a needle in his hand. And the cops, and I was bent over a body while I was doing this, and the cops took him down and arrested him at that moment in time. So that's a very dangerous, and that rarely happens. Most people that are around the dead that are junkies and say like a shooting gallery, I've had many times where they will wrap bodies up and then discard them in other places. And because they don't want to be associated with the police, they want to continue to feed their addiction. If you have a dead body at a residence like that, or where they're all, holed up in that particular place, that draws attention. And of course, you draw attention to them, somebody's going to jail. But in Matthew Perry's case, that's not what happened. He has a personal assistant, and he had a couple of personal assistants over the years that, to my way of thinking, would go out and acquire these drugs. And that's why Massa has been charged in this particular case. He's that bridge between, I think, two physicians and also this ketamine queen. This smacks of course, I'm thinking of Michael Jackson right now, where, he famously said to his physician, more milk.
Yep.
And he referred to this combination, which in and of itself it had anesthetic properties to it. He would get the milk, and the physician would apply it to him. Of course, the physician, this is a Schedule III drug.
Dr. Conrad Murray.
I'm talking about. Yeah, and you have to be a physician, a licensed physician, to acquire it. If you cannot get it from a physician, then you would rely on someone like the ketamine queen, where you can actually acquire it from Mexico, and it can be brought in as an injectable in the liquid form.
When that's the case, Joe,
yes.
Are there varying levels of ketamine? Like, for example, when you buy drugs, when your doctor prescribes a drug, it usually has 10 milligrams, 5 milligrams, what have you. Is it the same thing with ketamine? Are there different strengths to ketamine, or is it just here's ketamine?
Well, it's more of the applied dosage. Okay. And the same thing applies here with, you can look at dosages from this perspective. Remember, according to this personal assistant, Mr. Perry said, give me a big shot.
Right.
Okay. Well, what can we draw from that? Well, we would say that, okay, give me a big shot. That means that you're going to up the dosage. So do we say that the regular dosage, whatever milligrams it was that was being applied, and that will come out eventually, was it insufficient to the task, to that level that Mr. Perry wanted to achieve? Or you can look at it from the perspective, you're going to take multiple dosages over the period of a day. And this individual had given Mr. Perry multiple injections over that period of time. And this is another thing. This personal assistant he's not even the equivalent of a nursing student, okay? But yet he is applying this high-powered drug to this man at his request, according to the personal assistant. Mr. Perry is saying, inject me with it. That leaves us at another point. Why does Mr. Perry need someone to inject him? Why is he not injecting himself? Did he have a fear of needles, perhaps? Maybe he was unsure of how to utilize a needle. Or was it something else? Because this guy was really involved in acquisition, I think, of the drugs. And this goes to a bigger point. And you and I have talked about this on multiple occasions on Body Bags, Dave, where we have an individual who is going to have access to the drugs, and they are that pressure point that when the police begin to work these cases, Dave, they can apply that pressure, and guess what? Somebody is always going to roll over on another person or another group of people.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Matthew Perry, according to all reports, had a long tragic history of substance abuse. And Dave, one of the things that's really heartbreaking about his journey, because it is a journey, it's a horrific journey that I don't wish on anyone, his family, his friends, everybody in his circle. You had mentioned his colleagues on the television show Friends. You can imagine watching this, who they frame as a sweet man, develop the dwindles, essentially, where he would, kind of his trajectory would take him downhill. He'd gain weight and he would lose weight. And you can tell their affect kind of changes over a period of time. But, he had a problem in the past with opioid addiction, which is different than dependency upon ketamine. And for me as an investigator, when I'm working a case and I have someone that migrates from one type of drug to another that has different properties and how it's going to impact you physiologically, that's that. I don't know that it necessarily matters what the drug is, Dave. It has to do with that craving, that burning desire. And looking back at this opioid addiction, Matthew Perry had paid a price for this. He had actually had intestinal problems as a result of the opioid addiction, and that is not uncommon. I have had cases where I've had people that have been addicted to opioids, and they have had a necrotic bowel. They will develop things like fecal impaction, where they cannot pass waste effectively. And apparently this is what may have happened with Mr. Perry in the past, that probably part of his intestine had become infarcted. And what that means, when we say the term infarcted, you can actually have a myocardial infarction, which is a heart attack. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the blood supply in an organ becomes compromised, so that part of the tissue that blood source, or that vascular source supplies to keep it healthy, it dies. And so with a bowel infarction, which may have been, and it sounds as though it was with the opioid problem, part of his bowel died, Dave, and he had to have that resected and then have a colostomy bag placed in. And I don't know that I realized that necessarily, but you're talking about wearing, just let this sink in just for a second, wearing your addiction. That, can you imagine the horror of this, that you've had to go through surgical treatment for this problem that has arisen from an opioid addiction? I would imagine there was a physician that was telling him, look, you cannot continue on down this road. We've already seen this happen with your intestines. We have saved you. And they only gave him, I think they told his family, like a 2 or 3% of surviving relative to this bowel problems that he had.
But for Matthew Perry, and I'm being honest when I tell you this, I don't think he thought of ketamine as something that could kill him. I don't think he thought of it as as you would something used for depression. I'm treating depression. It gives me euphoria. The one thing he did talk about in his book was that ketamine is not for him. When he first used ketamine, didn't like it. But as addicts do, alcoholics call it the beer experiment, Joe. When you stop drinking liquor, okay, and you say, well, I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to drink beer. I'm just going to drink beer. Like that, an alcoholic thinks that way, okay? And we all do that. You go through the beer experiment, and then you realize, well, the only thing I can really drink is water. And,
Yeah.
And the same thing with people who take pills. You realize there's the Tylenol experiment. People who are used to taking pills, they will eventually, as they narrow it down, they'll be taking aspirin, and they'll take a bunch of them, Tylenol, what have you. And I think based on what I was reading about Matthew Perry and what he had done in his life, and look at what he had in his system, ketamine became that safe drug. They're treating his depression. It's not like cocaine. It's not like opioids. It's not like OxyContin. It's not like all these other things that nearly killed him. This one just makes me feel good, and it's okay. And a doctor gave me the script. Here's how you know it's a deadly drug. Here's how you know it's feeding an addiction. And by the way, here's how you know the Dr. Placentia should be in prison for the rest of his life. Dr. Placentia bragged first of all, he told another patient that Matthew Perry was spiraling out of control. He knew ketamine had spun this guy. But 2, he was selling $12 worth of ketamine for $2,000 to Matthew Perry. A $12 vial of ketamine. They were charging Matthew Perry $2,000 because they knew he had the money. And this is what Placentia actually told to his partner, Chavez. This is a direct text. I wonder how much this moron will pay. Oh. You have the drug dealer hiding in a doctor's smock, and you have the addict who is rich and famous, who, again, probably thinks this isn't going to kill me. The OxyContin would kill me. The booze would kill me. The Percocet, all those are going to, this won't kill me. It's ketamine. It's treating my depression. I feel like I'm on a happy cloud.
I've had this discussion with other people in the medical legal field, and I think that I have mentioned this before. And should we consider, I think, as coroners and medical examiners, should we consider delving into this world of ruling these deaths from ODs as not accidental events, but as homicides? Because, you don't necessarily, there's people in the world of prosecution, many times they'll go down this road of intent. And listen, it doesn't matter if I happen to be holding a weapon in my hand and I'm pointing the weapon around and I'm acting careless with it, and I pull the trigger and it strikes someone in the chest, we're probably going to rule that as a homicide. And the cause of death is going to be the gunshot wound, obviously. And Dave, I'm very interested in this particular case with the manner of death in Matthew Perry's case. Should the medical examiner coroner in LA, should his case be ruled an accidental death, or should it be ruled as a homicide? And they deal with this issue of I know you've heard this before, callous indifference. Mm-hmm. And you think about these comments that the physician is making here, and it's not like this physician is some child that doesn't have a concept of what these pharmaceuticals can do to somebody, right? I mean, by their own admission, they're making these comments referring to this man as, would you say, is it an idiot?
A moron. I wonder. This is what actually turned me on this. I was really trying to hold my emotions in on this because I don't like. It's easy for addicts and addicts' families to blame other people. It really is, because if the addict doesn't get the drugs, he's not dead. If his assistant doesn't shoot him up. But when you look at this and you think you've got 2 doctors, medical doctors, that are providing something that they know what it does. They know the effects of ketamine. They know you have to be able to write this prescription. Joe, I can't write it. I can't grab a lab thing and write prescriptions for this medicine. They could, because they knew what it did. But you've got Dr. Placentia, Dr. Chavez, and I wonder how much this moron will pay, selling him $12 worth of ketamine for $2,000. Now, he also expressed a desire. This is what they're saying. Placentia expressed a desire to become Perry's quote unquote go-to for drugs. And he's the one that instructed Perry's assistant, Kenneth Iwasa, to how to inject him. So he was trained on how to inject Matthew Perry with ketamine. And all I can think of is the guy knows his history, and he's saying, I want to be his go-to guy for drugs. Why aren't you? What is the Hippocratic Oath? Do no harm.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing we're looking at here. And it's a real touchstone. I said that I don't watch true crime, but one of my favorite programs of all time that actually appeared on Netflix was the show, and I've told you about it, called The Pharmacist.
I watched that, by the way.
Yeah, and it's just gut-wrenching with what this man went through relative to his son. And he uncovered this idea of pill mills, right? And what this this group of physicians or this organization was willing to do in order to feed these addictions of these, to these individuals. When you're a medical examiner and you work a case like this, because, as I said, it can get confusing. I think you find an individual who is floating essentially face down in a standalone jacuzzi on his property, Mr. Perry's property, that is. You go in to do the autopsy and you discover that he does in fact present with elements of drowning in his death. But is drowning actually the cause of death? And that gets into this gray area where you're wondering, was the amount of ketamine that he had on board, was it, as physicians are prone to say in my world, forensic pathologists, that it's incompatible with life, the level of drugs that you have on board, or was it falling over into the water and the autopsy demonstrated that he did in fact drown? And here's another interesting little point that we look for, at autopsy. And these two things are kind of fascinating. This drug, like an opiate, actually depresses your respiratory system, and it can make your lungs kind of heavy, okay, if you will. You go into like this congestive event. Well, this mechanism is not too dissimilar from the process of drowning, because that's one of the things that happens. You begin to, take on water. You can imagine you passed out. I don't know if anyone's ever, kind of fallen asleep in the tub before in a warm bath. And you slip off into the water and all of a sudden you're choking on water. That's actually happened to me before, working midnights and coming home, taking a hot bath, and I've fallen asleep in a bathtub. It's terrifying. But, when you have this drug on board, your system is so depressed at that point in time that you can't recover from this kind of fatal spiral that you're in because of the drug. So you have these two potential causes of death with Matthew Perry's fatal event here that they're going to be looking at. And now that they have actually affected not an arrest, but multiple arrests relative to this, 5 people moving forward, that's going to be interesting to see how this is played out. And one other thing, Dave, I'm going to be interested to see if the physicians that are involved in this, pay close attention here, folks, I'm telling you, if the physicians in this particular case are treated the same way as the ketamine queen, all right? And think about that just for a second, because many times there are events that occur involving physicians where the term medical misadventure is talked about. Generally, that's like a surgical intervention where something happens and someone dies. But I just wonder, in this case, are they going to be as robust with their pursuit of justice in this case relative to the physicians as they will with this lady, the ketamine queen? I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.